Good evening. My name is Arlene Miller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to this edition of Our Town. On May 15th this year, just a few weeks away, there will be a special election in the town of Longmeadow. This election is to fill a one-year vacancy created on the Board of Selectmen, on the Select Board, I guess I should say, by the resignation of Christine Swanson. Two candidates are vying for the one seat, Mark Barowsky and Richard Foster. And this evening's show is dedicated to discussing the election and other issues with these two candidates. My goal here is to introduce you, our viewers, to each of these candidates so you can make an intelligent decision as you vote on May 15th. The first interview will be with Mark Barowsky. I'd like to welcome you, Mark.
Thank you, Arlene.
And thank you for having the courage to run for elected office in Longmeadow. Appreciate that. So let's start by just tell the viewers and myself something about yourself. Who are you and why should I vote for you?
Well, I've been a resident in town since 1958. Went through the school system here and came back and started my family, and have lived in town ever since. I have spent 2 years, I served 2 years on the Capital Planning Committee in the early 90s. And after a short period of time, I joined the Finance Committee, and I'm currently in my 7th year of the Finance Committee, and 2 of those years I've served as chair of the committee. And as a consequence of my past experience, and more specifically with the financial aspects of town, I think I'm more than well qualified to handle the policies and the constraints that we have in town financially. I believe that it certainly takes a long time. I know you have the warrant for this particular year, and we're going to be voting on a $56 million budget come the spring meeting, and on May 8th. And you just don't fall into understanding a $56 million budget. And it takes a good solid year to really understand what goes on in that budget. And I would say that it takes several years to be really conversant in what goes on in that budget. And my experience is such that I'm at that place. And I have the longevity in serving the town, that there have historically been things that have gone on that are now coming back around full circle, but from a different tact, and without having the longevity and the experience of going through it the first time, then it's very hard to rebut or revisit those issues and say, oh, but 4 years ago you said this, now you want to do this. Now tell me why. So you have a good memory. Well, I have a pretty good memory when it comes to that stuff, right? So what makes you so you think this makes you qualified to be on the select board? Absolutely. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the issues in town, and I have a couple I'm curious about your opinion on, and then I'd like to spend a few minutes maybe on the warrant. Okay. There's 28 or so, round numbers, articles on the warrant, and just a couple of questions to get your reaction to those. So we're in the midst of a town manager search. Yeah. What do you think we should be looking for? What do you think are some of the characteristics you would like to have as a? Well, I think that the town manager, as you know, that the way that the charter is currently organized is that we have the general government side of things, and then you have the school side of things, and it just seems that there is no breaching the gap from the management side of the town. And so I would like to see a town manager that would reach out to the schools to try and come to some kind of a unified financial movement, you know, or policy in town. And I would also like to see a town manager who will embrace the other committees in town. The town manager that we currently have, she did a fairly good job, but I think that we had issues, certainly from the Finance Committee, about getting certain things, information down to us. There was a lot of blocking on information flow.
So communication, strong communication skills?
Very, well, more so than that. the charter, prior to the charter, we had an appropriations committee. And if you remember...
Now, if you're going to you want a towel for crying about the position...
No,
of
I'm not crying.
Okay,
I'm not crying.
okay.
I'm just giving a little historical perspective, okay?
Yeah.
Which you know because you were there. And you know that the Appropriations Committee was the committee that was really in charge of developing the budget.
Right.
Right. And then when the charter came, things changed. And so a lot of teeth came out.
The responsibility of the budget now lays with
the town manager and the select board.
It's the town manager's budget that is approved by the select board.
Right, right. So the finance committee got kind of pushed aside. And I think when that happened, and we now know that the charter calls for the finance committee to be in charge of long-term planning and also to be as an advocate for those residents in town at the town meeting. So it requires information being disseminated to the finance committee in order to fulfill their role, but information was not free-flowing.
Okay,
and
so
I would have to say that has to be
so communication skills,
right,
and ability to breach the gap.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're in the middle of that process, and most likely you and Mr. Foster will both be on the board at the time of those decisions, possibly. So you'll have some input into that.
Right.
At the end of the day.
May I also add?
Yes.
That I'm not a big fan of the increase in the salary line for the town manager. There's a significant increase that's put in place on this particular budget, and it
for the new candidate.
Yeah, there's $125,000, which is a significant.
That's a fly. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a significant increase over what was passed, and in fact, I think it's kind of overinflated compared to what some mayors in surrounding towns are getting, and they're in charge of the entire schools and the general government side. So I don't know that it's a proper course to go.
Well, you may have some input into that.
Right.
Actually, at the end of the day. So you mentioned the charter. Let me ask you about the charter. It's now been in place, I guess, about 7 years.
Right. Because
the town manager's been here about 7 years. What's your take on the charter? Its usability? Should it be modified? There's some angst about that.
I have, my personal feeling is that, and I want to go back to the split in general government versus schools, that it's kind of I regard it as an unwieldy situation, and I think that a mayor would be a much better situation for us because, as you know, a mayor would be in charge of the entire financial aspects of the town. And when we have these two areas going in two different directions without a unified approach to some kind of long-term plan for the town, it becomes frictional and unnecessarily so, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That debate could go on. And that debate did occur during the
forever, right? Yeah.
And I don't want to take your time to debate it here, but that's interesting. Are there any other visions that you have or things that you would really like to accomplish if you become a selectman?
Yes. I looked at, there was a long-term plan that was done for the town about 10 years ago.
Wow,
and,
a long time ago.
Yeah, and part of that plan actually indicated the property that's located, everybody calls it the Water Tower, but it's off of Frank Smith and Brooks Road and Academy Drive in that area.
How much land is that?
There's 21 acres.
Okay.
And in fact, I took a...
Town-owned land?
Town-owned, well, it's owned by the schools own a part of it, and the park department, Park and Rec owns another part of it. I actually took a Sunday afternoon and I walked the property. And I just wanted to see if it was viable. And I'm not a builder, but I think you can get a grasp of whether or not it's wetlands or it's doable or not doable. And
it's not wet.
It's not wet.
It's got a tower in it, though.
Right. Well, but the interesting part about the tower is that the tower, if you go on Academy Drive and you drive down Academy Drive, that water tower looks like it's growing out of people's roofs, and so people didn't have a problem buying property there. So initiative would be actually to open up that property for development as a over 55 community. And
how would that benefit the town?
Well, it would benefit the town, I think, in two major ways. Number one, we would gain on the, we would sell the property to a developer with certain requirements. And so we would have the cash infusion from the sale of the land one time, right? Then, and I've talked to a number of construction people who have some kind of idea in developing this sort of thing. And it's conceivable that it could yield 70 to 100 properties. And if you were going to envision properties at $350,000, $450,000 a piece, then it's conceivable that we would be increasing our revenues by $600,000 to $700,000 a year just in tax revenues. Mm-hmm. Now, if you look at what goes on in this town, $1 million tax infusion into the base, the tax base of this town, would carry this town for significant years to come. Mm-hmm. And so I think
Interesting. Right. I was telling David, I asked my husband before I came over what question he thought I should ask the candidates, and he said, ask them, this is the one of the several he gave me that I remember, what you think the biggest financial problem is in town. I'll ask you that since you sit on the finance committee.
Yeah, and I'm going to make some enemies with this answer.
Well, it's your time.
Thank you.
Make them or not.
The biggest burden that we have, if you're going to look at the town finances as a whole, our current greatest burden is special education. And I say that because out of our $56 million budget that we're going to be voting on, $31 million of that budget is total schools. Out of the total schools,
and that doesn't include benefits.
Right, exactly. Out of that $31 million, there's $10 million that is for special education. So 20% of our budget for the entire town goes for special education. Now, I know that there are special need kids in town that really deserve and require, but I question whether how much of it is a cultural issue that certain children get labeled as special education needs and have to be appointed somebody when they could actually be mainstream.
This, of course, is a mandate.
It is a mandate, but
it's an unfunded state and perhaps federal mandate.
I know about the state.
Yeah,
right.
I think it's federal as well.
But I think I'm sure you're aware of this, that several years ago the schools had a study done of special education, and so I think the cost for the study was about $30,000, and this company came back with recommendations that would yield $3 million in a decrease in cost of special education. Now, the response from the school committee at that time was, well, they showed us where we could make our cuts, but in order to make these cuts, we would have to do some increases in some other areas, and it didn't allow for the increases. So they put together a plan, and their plan is, which they're implementing, was to add staff, assistant principals in some of the schools, and do some other shifting around of people. And the problem is that at the end of 3 years, their plan was going to yield $75,000 in savings. Now, I have a hard time understanding how $3 million of cuts being specified over here, even though you have to go through some other gyrations in order to make it work, will only net a $75,000 savings. And I just have an issue with that. And when I sat in the meeting with representatives of the school committee and the select board at that time, and I asked them, well, tell me what your goal is, and they had no goal.
Mm-hmm. I have to follow up with this by asking you, how do you feel you would work with, as a selectman, the school committee? You obviously have some ideas that they might not agree with. How would you bridge the differences in views? It's often been an issue in this town, the schism between the two boards. which the town manager was supposed to help bridge.
Right. Let me give you the historical perspective on things.
Okay.
When I first started on the finance committee, Judd Peskin was the chair of the committee. And
Of the finance committee.
I'm sorry, of the finance committee, right. And there was tremendous friction between, those were just after Superintendent McGarry days and
Had the charter been adopted yet?
Yes.
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 So you were finance committee.
Right. And running of 2 books and, the folks that were involved in the school committee at that time, I won't name names.
No.
But anyway, there was this tremendous amount of friction that was going on. And at that time, it was my first year on the committee, and I remember come the springtime when they were still rolling out their budget, I actually got Judd, a couple of the select board members, the town manager, the CFO, myself in a room so that we could come up with some kind of way to manipulate what they're looking for to come to some kind of common ground. So that was my first year on the finance committee, and I will tell you that every year after that I've acted in the same manner with the school committee. And I think
Seeking compromise.
seeking some kind of compromise that, yes, you want to ask for the moon, but you're not going to get to the moon, so why don't we get to be reasonable people, and why do we have to go out on the town floor at town meeting and duke it out and look like idiots? It just doesn't make any sense. So some years I was successful in bridging that gap, and some years we had that issue with the pyramid override deal that failed. But I think the people who are on the school committee, and certainly the management people in the school, know that I have really, my opinion is I'm looking more for the entire town, for the entire town to succeed, and that includes the schools as well as general government. And so I think they know that that's the direction, that I have no hidden agendas in regard to those things, and that I tend to be kind of shooting from the hip and talk straight. And
You're not a good poker player.
I don't want to. I can be, but I don't. There's no need. What's the point? I mean, because I understand that anybody who's volunteering to do anything for the town is looking to better the town. I feel. Right? So we're all moving in the same direction. So why do we have to be frictional about the whole thing? Right?
Well, good luck with that.
Well, I understand that.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple of questions about the warrant. Talk for a few minutes about the budget.
Yep.
Don't dwell so much on the process, but as I'm understanding, that there's like one budget this year, which is so refreshing. There isn't a lot of this stuff, a lot of angst about it. You may comment on that. And then I understand we're not asking for the maximum?
Yeah, by a small amount.
Okay.
Right.
What, any comments on the budget?
I will say this, and it kind of goes back, some people had some assessments done to their reassessments to their homes this past year, and they saw some significant increases in the assessed values, and their taxes went up as a result. And I think that most people were of the opinion that this was the roll-in of the high school costs, which is not really true. There was a very small amount of high school costs that was rolled in this past tax year. The major burden for the high school funding is
the new high school.
Yes, for the new high school. The major burden is going to roll in January next year, where people are going to see a 5.9% increase in taxes.
Ouch.
And that's huge. And I mean, that is based upon this particular budget, so I don't know that there's anything that can be done in that regard. Now, there's going to be another increase the year following, but it's going to be a smaller increase.
So this is a debt exclusion we voted on, and the town overwhelmingly supported, so they can't complain.
But you know that
the reality
there will be buyer's remorse, I think. And
the reality will hit.
I know. So I would say that Let's just talk about this year's budget, and then we could talk about, you know, if I am successful in getting on the select board. I think that in order to offset these other issues, we really have to sit down with the school committee. Again, it has to be a plan that's developed between the select board, the school committee, and the finance committee. We have to come to some kind of way to try and even approach 0.0% increase in real estate tax in order to offset these other burdens of the debt exclusions that we have.
Well, that's a challenge. That's great. I mean,
but you have to have everybody on the same page.
Sure, sure.
You know, and I'm going to a finance committee tonight. The school committee, I guess they've come to grips, or I believe that they've come to grips with their contract, their labor negotiations.
Talk about that, obviously.
I don't know what the actual percentages are,
right?
But we'll know what the percentages are tonight, and if what I hear is true, it's going to be rather onerous.
Yeah, and in fairness to our employees, they've taken 0 to or 1%. Very little wage increases
0.001
over the last 3 years, and that's been a tremendous help to the town.
I agree with that,
yeah.
But I will tell you that we are now in a world where people are happy they have a job.
Exactly, exactly.
You know?
All right, so the budget should pass without too much difficulty because there shouldn't be much.
I hope so.
Okay, there's one, the Finance Committee, of which you're a member, gives their opinion, which is your job,
right,
on each, which is one very important. I always look at your opinion on
right.
this. I think it's very important. On the warrant articles, especially the spending articles, if you approve them. And there's just one that jumped out at me that only one that you're not recommending, that I'm gathering. And it is the last article, and it has to do with hiring, if I understand it correctly, allocating $10,000
for a study.
For a study of the allocation of public works operations, where the personnel work between streets and sewer and water and
exactly.
and whatever else. So why didn't you recommend this?
Because we feel that that's really should be the obligation of the manager of the department, and I think that Mike, given the directive to do it, has Mike Vrabel, who's the
head of DPW.
Head of DPW. I think that he has the ability to get that job done without spending $10,000, and perhaps he has to work in concert with Paul Pasterzik, who's the town financial officer, in order to get the accounting right on it. But
I mean, a lot of those folks are interchangeable between their jobs. They're
right.
cross-trained and all that. I don't even know how you would account for it, but I understand
right.
the idea. But so you stand by the, because I'll probably ask you at the town meeting just for the record, because I'd like to know.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be answering. It'll have to be the chair of the committee.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. A couple of other questions before I ask you if you have any questions that you want to talk about. This special election is on May 15th. Mm. Very little has been said about it. It's two folks are running for it. You've both taken out papers for a 1-year and a 3-year seat. I personally what do you think about the process that we went through to get to it, the petition situation, and if you, very pointedly, if you win the 1-year seat, will you aggressively seek the 3-year seat, or will you not?
Well, let me first say that if I win the 1-year seat, I will not go after the 3-year seat.
Even though you're already on the ballot, so people know. Nothing you could do about that.
That couldn't be changed.
Right.
And I have told people that I will stand out in front of the community house with one of my signs that says "Vote Barowsky" is a no vote Barowsky, and to counsel people not to vote for me going into the polls. For the second election. For the second election.
And the general town election is on June 12th or something like that. So we're having an election on May 15th with 1 seat, 2 candidates.
Right.
And both of you are on the ballot for both elections, figuring the one that loses, and there's seats open in the second election as well. So,
right.
So what did you think of, what's your opinion of the fact that we're having this one election 30 days ahead?
I think the special election is ridiculous. I think that it was something that some people had an agenda, and they raised a petition and forced the issue to happen, costing the town another $13,000 or $14,000, which is what it costs us to hold an election. And it certainly could have been staved off until the general election in June. There's no reason for it other than perhaps trying to seat somebody onto the select board in order to garner votes for a town manager position.
Well, history will tell us the story,
right.
however that works out.
Right.
A question that somebody else sort of contributed is, do you support, what would be your position on an optional meals tax for restaurants and businesses in Longmeadow that might raise about $50,000 or $75,000 a year?
You mean an increase in the meals tax?
Yes. Well, supplemental meals tax. It's an option. It's a local option where you can add a
What's
percent.
the percentage?
I don't know. So you're not familiar with the issue?
I'm not. I would imagine if it's 1 or 2%, I don't think I'd have a problem. But if you want to start killing people for 10%, I would have an issue with that.
I'm guessing that the option, sort of like CPC, community preservation, you get to choose, but I don't know that. So
right.
So in general, the concept isn't negative to you. It's just how much it would be.
I wouldn't have a problem if it was a small amount. I don't think I'd have a problem with it, but I think I would want to give it a 1-year trial. I mean,
I don't know what you can do.
Well, you don't know if you can do that or not?
I don't know the law.
Oh.
You'd have to look.
You really have to take a look and see how it's going to affect the restaurants in town.
Yeah, I think the idea would be revenue, obviously.
Sure.
Obviously.
Sure.
So, okay, great. So is there anything in particular that you would like to talk about? You have an audience?
I really haven't prepared anything to talk about.
Well, no, that's okay. So what would you do, is there anything that you might have done differently in the last year or two that this select board, or if you been a member of this select board during the past year or two?
Well, in particular, I have to laud them on their initial reaction and the work that they did for excuse me, remediation after the storm in October. I think they did an excellent job, and I certainly think that Eric Madison and Mike Vrabel did an excellent job taking care of things. But then I think things fell down.
In what regard?
Well, I haven't seen, our weather's been rather mild, and we certainly have had the ability to go out and do the work, and nobody's been, I've been in the paper saying how bad I feel things are, that we haven't been taking care of the stump issue in town. We know we have, during the cleanup process of the storm, every tree was GPS'd, and we know the location of every place that something was cut or cut down. So there's a quantified number as to, and I've heard numbers like 2,200 trees or something like that.
I've heard different.
But
there is an article on the warrant for $20,000 to begin stump grinding.
Right now, the $20,000. Understand that in the budget. The budget, there was $130,000 for forestry. $20,000 was cut out of the budget.
This year?
Yes.
Okay.
So the $20,000 that you're looking at in that warrant article to come out of free cash is actually to buoy up that 110 up to 130.
Okay.
So the 130 is certainly enough money to start implementing some kind of remediation on stumps. But all I heard about was, well, we got to develop a plan, we got to develop a plan. Well, while they're talking about and
I'm going to ask you to sort of get to the point, because I've got just about a minute and a half.
My opposition was part of those, we got to develop a plan, all right? But during the I have to develop a plan time, they're talking about, the select board's talking about a second water meter for those who irrigate their place. Now, I looked at the water bills when it all became a big issue. You're talking about 40 or 50 people that affects. You know, to me, that's not a proper priority. The priority is to the town in general. So if the town in general is affected by cleanup of stumps, that's who you deal with first. You don't deal with a couple of water meters for 40 people. Well, it makes no sense.
Well, this is good. This is showing the way you think.
Right.
This is what we need to know. So, last word, why should we vote for you?
I have the experience. I have the knowledge. I'm not afraid to speak my mind. I have no personal agenda. My agenda is for the town as a whole. And that's the reason why you should vote for me.
Well, thank you very much for coming and sharing that with us.
Thank you for having me.
And
half an hour went by fast.
We'll just take a break, and then we'll come back with the second candidate. Thank you.
Thanks.